everyone. Welcome. It's good to see you again. We have lots to talk about, of course. Again, we determine a topic on Sunday, and by the time we get to Wednesday, it's already old news. But lots going on. Many different organizations are organizing. You know what Governor Pritzker of Illinois said? Don't give those other people a moment's peace. And I think those different organizations are doing it. Kurt, you had a question about...
Who is Indivisible?
Who is Indivisible? With liberty and justice for all.
Indivisible is a national group that takes on causes, and I think it was originally nonpartisan from what I'm told and what I'm learning. But it seems that over the years it's kind of shifted to more of a progressive movement to stand up to the Trump administration and get some progressive leaders elected. So I think there has been a shift in that over the years. I was contacted a couple of months ago here locally to step up and be a leader in Indivisible Flagler. There's spin-off groups all across America taking on causes. And so here locally with Indivisible Flagler, about a week ago, I organized a Stop Deportation rally that took place in Daytona by Avello Airport. So that happened last Saturday. I was organizing it for a couple of weeks. That happened last Saturday. I contacted media sources. 2 journalists did interview me for it. And last night it was picked up on the Rachel Maddow show.
Yeah.
So that was a pretty big deal.
Right, you mentioned
Avello?
Avello and Daytona Beach.
The rally that I organized.
Yeah.
Rachel Maddow reported on that last night.
There were successful rallies in New York, in Baltimore, Washington, and in Daytona Beach.
Right.
Thanks.
Is that the airline that's...
Yes,
Right.
That's the one.
Yes,
You
helping
have-
to
you-
deport
if you-
immigrants with the Trump administration. So, we take on
They
different
named
causes.
that airport Avello?
No, it's
Avello flies with
one of
Daytona
the
Beach.
airlines out of that airport.
Right.
So also with Indivisible, we're having a rally tomorrow night for any of you that can make it. And tomorrow night's topic is in regards to working class people and billionaires paying their fair share. So that's for May Day tomorrow, 5:30 to 6:30 p.m. on Route 100 in front of Target. So we have a rally then. We're also working on some efforts for Pride Month in June. We had a speaker here, Amanda Redwine, and we have been connected up with Flagler Pride. There's a Pride Festival in June here in town, and our Indivisible will have a table at the event that we're paying for, and at one end of our table we'll talk about Indivisible and what we do and the causes that we work on, and the other end of the table we're going to work on voting and giving people information to learn more about vote by mail if they were purged from the system within the last year. We'll have QR codes for everybody that comes to our table to check their voting status. And we want to make some efforts towards the midterms for next year and not wait until next year, but work on those efforts through the next year. So
Yeah,
it
the
was quite a
DEC
bit.
is also planning on having a table
Yeah.
that they're gonna split with the clubs. So maybe you guys could all arrange to be together in your hours, like a big presence.
What clubs are they having?
Palm Coast Democratic Club with the DEC.
Yep.
Yeah,
Jan will be paying for
and
the
the
tables.
Flagler Beach Club also.
Yeah, and then and the Flagler Beach Club, so they're gonna have
All
a
gonna
table,
be-
so if they can be next to your table, it might make a bigger splash.
Yes.
At any rate, Indivisible was founded by and this is my particular bugaboo because, my particular bugaboo has to do with Internal Revenue Code Section 501c3, and Indivisible was originally a non-501c3, so that if you wrote a check to support them, you could deduct it from your taxes. But of course, they couldn't endorse candidates and couldn't promote individuals
that's right,
for office. They relinquished that privilege and reincorporated it as a 501c4. So a 501c4, you can write a check to them, but you cannot subtract. They can deduct it on your Schedule A on your Form 1040, and but they can then have the privilege of endorsing candidates. I think I mentioned last week, I'm not sure, that it's gone a little further, but the IRS found that a local church that endorsed candidates was not liable to lose their 501c3 candidates. A church that's actually on airport property, or the airport has an industrial zone, if you're familiar with it, on the west end of the airport, and there's a church that meets there. They endorsed and brought up to the pulpit to speak Jill Woolbright, who ultimately was defeated, but they endorsed a candidate. Thus, they were liable to lose their 501c3 status. People who made donations to that church would not be able to deduct it, and the IRS said, no, it's fine, go ahead. You can, yes, a stunning decision that's being looked at by Americans United for Separation of Church and State lawyers in Washington to appeal it. We will be the Grinch that stole Christmas, but they made a promise when they acquired their status as 501c3 that they would not endorse candidates, that they would not engage in partisan political activity, and they lied. So it's a church for which thou shalt not bear false witness doesn't mean very much, but that's more complicated.
Well, I can
issue.
tell you that's pretty shocking to me that they say, oh, it's okay.
Yeah,
So now
yeah.
is that okay for everybody?
You know what? There is no. Yes, it would seem that any church, any house of worship, can thus endorse a candidate based on the results of that. By the way, it's unusual because once a complaint is made, and I and several others made complaints about the church's activity, after that you get a note from the IRS saying, we'll investigate this, well, by throwing it into the round file, and we will keep you posted and so on, and they never do. And so now we've had, what, a 20, 40, 60% cut in the personnel at the IRS, and somehow they did go through some kind of investigation and responded by saying it's okay. Doesn't seem to make a lot of sense and doesn't have a lot of history to back it. So we'll examine it, and yes, I'm sure it'll be tested more and more. So that's what Al will talk about, the issue of separation of church and state for just a moment, which again is near and dear to my heart. Al pointed out that while we sit here, or maybe over now, the Supreme Court, well, tell about the case that the Oklahoma, school, what's it called? A charter school, thank you, I couldn't think of the word. I meant like a management school here.
An Oklahoma charter school, an Oklahoma church, which has said that anyone who works for them must ascribe to the church's beliefs and policies, has applied for a charter to operate a state-funded charter school in Oklahoma. And that is being challenged. So this would really be directly the government funding a parochial school. And that was, the court met on that today. As Merrill just said, I don't know whether they're still hearing it or not, but that was being adjudicated today.
Right, and the interesting part of the slippery slope is that the lawyers for the school are citing the issue of school vouchers. That is, we already pay taxes here in Florida that ultimately find their way to scholarships to pay for the tuition for kids to attend religious schools.
Correct.
And again, I'm sorry that Dave Camarca is not here, but he's a Temple of Satan person and eagerly awaits, and in fact the Temple of Satan has announced that if religious charter, what's that?
That's a real thing?
Oh, it's a real
extremely real.
thing. By the way, there's another, and
Thought it was kidding.
it's incorporated as a 501c3. The Church of the Flying Spaghetti Monster
Yes.
is also, and the Church of the Flying Spaghetti Monster has gained the right to put up a Christmas, a holiday, some kind of display at the end of December in the Florida Rotunda, the Capitol Rotunda in Tallahassee. And so these alternate churches will then be able to say, You can do it for your church, we can do it for our church, this is our belief. The same will happen with Muslim the schools, and they'll teach Sharia, and right wing will go berserk. We already pay for a substantial presence in public schools in the Clearwater area that teach Scientology. So you're funding Scientology education through your tax. So am I. We're all paying taxes, and we fund that kind of education. So there's a long road and a process that has to be gone, but we'll be interested to see. The Supreme Court heard the arguments. They have to announce the argument by the end of their term the end of June 30th, I think it is, and we'll know what the outcome is.
But the Church of Satan, by the way, is, there's another one called the Satanist Church.
Yeah, well, you know what, I think they all come under the umbrella of the Temple of Satan, but there are some, and there's also Wiccan. There's a Wiccan.
Yeah, that's, right.
Yeah.
That's a more animist
right.
kind of thing. It doesn't have, they don't subscribe to a God. They don't say that Satan is God. Their whole angle is to challenge the church-state nonsense. And the tenet of DeMarco's church is be nice to everybody and let everybody do what they want to do. That's basically the Church of Satan. But they chose that name to get attention when they want when they want to fight against church-state, get involved in church-state issues.
So I want to go back to two issues we talked about before under the umbrella of building a better candidate. One of them, an email suggestion followed. There have been a few people in the county who have wanted to create for the Democratic Party an army of signature petition gatherers, and that would save people running for local office in the vicinity of $1,000. So when you decide to run for office, you either file 1,000 petitions or you lay down $1,000 or something and pay the fee. So the suggestion was that we offer candidates ourselves that we would each go out and get 30, 40, 50, or even 100 signatures to help them get on the ballot through the petition process, and thus save that $1,000 that they could then spend on yard signs or whatever. That was suggestion number one, and I was wondering whether you would be interested, anybody would be interested in promising to work to acquire signatures for liberal candidates who want to run for office and save that $1,000. So I won't put anybody on the spot right now. The second one is to start a PAC in which we collect money. And once again, it's not tax deductible, but we get political donations, contributions they're called, not donations, political contributions, and then we put together a package of however much money we have, $1,000, $2,000, or whatever. By the way, the PAC can only exist if we get at least $500 a year and bring it in. And then when someone wants to run, by the way, I meant to mention that Josh Wheel has an announcement he's going to make at the end of June, which is a wonderful thing. I don't think he has an announcement to say, I'm not going to run, but
I bet you he's gonna run for governor.
Oh, you think he's going to run for governor?
Yes.
I think there's better candidates than him.
Yeah.
I never knew
David
that.
Jolly.
I talked to him Sunday at the picnic.
Yeah.
And I asked him what he thought of David Jolly,
Yeah.
the Republican, and he was a little coy about that. And he said, well, Jolly was a pretty good candidate, basically. And then I asked him about Morgan, and I said, Morgan looks like he needs to get off the sauce, actually. I mean, he's not looking too good. But I got the impression Josh wasn't too hot, wasn't too hot for Morgan. But he never mentioned anything about governor. I assumed he was going to run for Congress again.
Yeah.
That was
I could
my
see
assumption
that.
from the conversation that I had with him Sunday.
Yeah.
Because he talked about keeping the infrastructure, what they have in place, building on what they have, and maybe he is going to run for governor, I don't know, but he didn't.
I would think David Jolly would have a better shot than Wheel in this state. Wheel puts himself out there as a progressive Democrat. In Florida, I don't think Republicans would buy into that, whereas some might vote for Jolly because he was a Republican.
What I was telling Josh,
very moderate Republican.
with Jolly, he's on Nicole Wallace, I mean,
Right.
twice, 3 times, 4 times
Right.
a month.
Well, he just switched his party
so
to
people
Democrat.
know who he is.
Right.
Yeah.
And
I like him.
He's
I think
sensible.
I think he would have a much better shot
I
than
do
Josh
too.
for governor
Yeah.
of the state of Florida. I
It's
mean,
interesting. I will.
Right, we need
I will
someone who
send
can
an,
win.
I will send an email. I'll copy you if you'd like the Wheel urging him to run against Fine again. That he was really quite successful, considering we were 30% for Trump, and then he came within 15% of beating.
that's the
Fine.
impression I got, that
Yeah,
he was going to
yeah.
run again. So-
And so if we were to put together a PAC, we would have several $1,000s that we could either give to Josh Wheel or to somebody running for mayor or to somebody running for school board or somebody or so on. So that takes us deciding that we're going to, A, each of us can kick in some money, and B, urge other people to kick in some money so that ultimately we have a pot of money. It's sad, but we all know that political offices have price tags. Okay? And people say, and the interesting thing about Josh Wheel is, and the infrastructure I think Joe is referring to is, he's got a money machine. He had plenty of money. He really did very well.
He was giving it away at the end,
Yeah,
with the
yeah.
leftover money went
Right.
all up and down.
Yeah, so
All the
he
groups.
might not need the money, but other local candidates might need the money. So that would be
Have you heard anything from Stockton? Just that he's interested again.
also
That's weird.
interested. But if Stockton, Wheel, who I mean, there's no
Yeah.
comparison. Wheel would be the person we'd like to get behind, I believe. Not that Stockton's a bad candidate.
But would he run for something other than
Possibly. By the way, we are more or less at the eastern extremity of District 6. Stockton is there's a little tiny tongue, and he lives, that includes Ocala, and he lives there. So he lives far, far away from
Yeah.
us. It will be interesting to see. But it's time now, maybe it's even late, to start thinking of these things. The election is only how many months away, and we really need to get going. There's no question.
So who
about
would
it.
start the PAC? You?
I might possibly. I'm so busy with so many other things, but it would take. Yeah, we. By the way, yeah, okay, it would be me. But the issue is that it requires. I don't want to use the word onerous, but you have the reporting. You have to report to, in this case, it's just Katie Leinert, but the local supervisor of elections. But you got to report your income, you got to report your expenditures, and you got to make
So
regular
isn't it
reports.
easier just to get the signatures? Isn't it easier just to get the 1,000 signatures?
By the way, so they are not mutually exclusive, by the way. We can do both. But yes, it is easy. If we could, muster and get 1,000 signatures, for some of the offices, I think it's 700 signatures, we could save candidates $1,000. That's the equivalent of giving them a $1,000 donation without opening our wallets to give a dime.
But which candidates would we be doing that?
Well, that would, once we had we would have to have them apply, or we would have to look and say, who do we want to help, who do we want to offer?
Right.
By the way, some of the more experienced candidates with whom I've spoken have said, don't bother with the petition, it just takes a lot of energy and it drains you. Just plunk down the money and go ahead and do
That's
it.
what
And that's,
I was gonna.
The Republicans
I do a lot of petition work in
Stan
the past,
yeah.
and I just wanna know, where can I pay?
yeah, okay.
You know, I much
That's
prefer
a,
to write a check.
now, Mark Stansell went petition route, I think. A bunch of us collected signatures from Mark Stansell. Yeah, I mean, it's a decision, but we can be helpful by providing, if we were able to get the number that was needed to have petitions.
My heartburn with Mark, even before he
Yeah.
turned, was he wouldn't go out and get any signatures for himself.
I was doing it, and then I heard that.
And,
It was somewhat
and
annoying.
I said, if it's not important enough for the man to go out himself, I sure as hell ain't gonna go out and do it for him.
It's called leadership, yes.
I'm glad you did, but
Yeah, I know you worked very hard.
I would take an easier approach if I was the candidate and talk with Jan and talk with leaders in the Democrat offices. There's 5 groups underneath the umbrella of Flagler County Democrats. Say there's 100 to 200 people in each of those groups. You send out an email to all of them and say, we need you to stop into the office during this week, during this time, and sign this, and then have other groups put it out too. And you already got 5 groups right there. I mean, you can get a whole bunch of signatures just by people stopping in on their own time.
Well, we didn't have
Leadership.
We didn't have a place.
Yeah, by the way, that's
See, we didn't have the
Yeah.
headquarters.
That's a very good point, though. I
Yeah,
like that.
yeah, it is. Depending on the number of people who respond to email requests like that, but yes, that's
People
very
show
true.
up for the
Yeah,
rallies.
yeah.
If 600 people are coming out for the rallies,
Yeah.
they can have a whole week time to stop in and sign this paper. And then you might have to still catch up with a few
Right.
hundred, but it's not
Yeah.
1,000.
Yeah. No, there are all sorts of avenues, and it can be done. So I would urge you all to give thought of that. And when candidates begin to appear, will we be ready to help acquire signatures? When I'm aware of it, or if you're aware of it, that they're trying to collect signatures, let's bring it to this table on our Wednesday meetings and decide whether or not we want to.
So Mayor, I have a question.
Yeah, please.
What seats are open,
I
and
was
is
thinking-
that information provided by Katie?
Yeah.
So we have from city council, where I believe there are 3 seats, because I know that Gambaro's kind of, he was brought in, it's gotta be,
Somebody's got rid of it.
Sullivan's gotta be reelected, and I think Teresa may be up, because those are 4-year
Yeah.
seats.
It's easy to find out, but
But because those petitions drive different needs than for House of Representatives or senators for Florida, because petitions all have to come out of the district they represent
Right.
within Palm Coast. But I've been trying to figure out from Senate down, because that's where it is, what positions are open in 2026 and what that requirement is, and I've had some difficulty getting that information.
if you know what, if you'll email me, I'll get you that information.
Because that, once we know what
It's open.
seats are open, then you have to develop a
Yeah.
plan on how to attract people for those seats.
And we might have
or
Merrill
what
on the
those
ballot.
needs. Right, and,
Well,
and that's possible.
I need to have my head examined, but I will not stand idly by if a right-wing religious theocrat wants to run for school board from District 1, which is an open seat.
Sure.
And
that's at school board as well.
And so on. So I will do it, and I can't stand the idea, and I know that that we look at ballots, and now city council and school board are nonpartisan, but in other races that there's a list of the Republicans on one side and there's a blank space on the Democrat side. I think that's demoralizing for all of us, and I would urge people, by the way, perhaps we should say, can we use your name, and we'll go collect signatures, even if you don't want to campaign, even if you don't want to do anything else, at least let us use your name so that people won't look at a ballot and see that the Democratic Party is moribund and can't come up with a candidate that,
Right.
somebody,
Well, even
somebody with a pulse.
Even beyond that, the Republicans have multiple PACs locally.
Yeah.
They don't do petition drives typically. They buy in because they have the money. They don't bother with the petitions. In my understanding, the expectation, the requirement of the petitions are getting a lot more scrutiny, and if it's filled out slightly, it's thrown out, and we're hearing over and over again where they were double duplicates and all of these efforts.
I had my signature challenged. I had to go into
So
into
you
I had to go
experienced-
into Katie and say,
Right.
Yeah.
no, that was
Yeah.
my signature.
So buying
Your
in
own signature.
has a cleaner
Yeah.
process. The second thing is, since this is a closed primary, the Republicans have learned to sandbag the primaries by having a candidate they want, and then they'll put another name on the primary so that that name, Republican name, gets 3 months of visibility and money draw and contributions to build for their campaign. And I remember Morley pleading with the Democrats to try to find a name just to put against him so that he could start campaigning early and get name recognition and get funding money, knowing that he was going to be whoever this was. Possibly like the example of James Stockton and Josh Wheel running against each other for the 6th district would cause visibility, campaigning, contributions to generate money and name recognition long before you waited for that last 2 months after the campaign. And the Republicans do that very well. They'll have that, what is it, the blank line trick that they do?
There are all sorts of, we're not supposed to be nonpartisan, but again, we are not part of an organized political organization. We're Democrats. Okay? And there's no organization at all, as opposed to the Republican machine that's really quite adept at doing all of this stuff.
So are you going to take the lead on forming a PAC?
I can if everybody wants to kick in some money.
I
And
think it's
if somebody, by the way, if somebody wants to be a treasurer, then
I think it's a great idea.
okay. That's
I would also,
Joanne.
I would like to contribute, and I would also like to suggest that the organization of this be as trim as possible,
Okay.
so that it's flexible and it doesn't have to deal with a whole lot of, but what about this and how about him, and because there could be a lot of discussion about, what level and where and how. I'm assuming the focus is going to be more local, but if it's not, then that's okay with me too.
Yeah.
But I can see myself, I can see Mark and I on the PAC committee, him arguing for local and me talking about the Senate and getting bogged down.
Yeah.
And basically, somebody's got to say, "Oh, we have this money, we're going to do this."
Yeah.
That's what it's
That's
That's
for.
what I would like
Yeah.
to see happen.
Yeah.
And how are those people gonna know that we have this money? Are we gonna have an article put in the paper? Are we gonna tell our local clubs?
I don't think it's difficult to whisper in a few critical ears, hey, we're sitting on a pot of $2,000, $3,000, $5,000, and they'll come to us.
Well, and the
Okay?
other value is attracting candidates that know that they don't have to come up with that
$1,000.
money to run. I mean, Josh Will
Yeah.
didn't get petitions.
Yeah.
He put money down at the
No,
last
again,
minute for the special election.
He had a very effective money machine, and that's
which
the
was
infrastructure
paid,
that's
and
in place.
that's kind of how it is.
Yeah.
So I would
Yeah.
definitely support the
All right,
investigation.
I'll bring information that we had talked once before, years ago, about forming a PAC, but if you're serious about it, I will bring the information that will understand the limitations, but the benefits.
We could probably take care of everything we need right here.
Absolutely.
So let's do it at our next meeting.
And I think we're raising the kind of money that we're talking about local elections. I don't think we're gonna raise $10,000, $15,000, $20,000.
Okay.
But, Mark Stansell or any of our people running for office, an extra $1,000, $2,000 would be helpful and perhaps might encourage somebody who's sitting on the sidelines to say, oh, if I can access that money, then maybe I'll throw my name in the hat and run for office. And that's what we want to encourage.
Well, and I remember during the general, there was I saw numerous, in fact, Perry from the REC handed me one of their flyers. They had a 3-way folded document, basic, had the list of all the candidates that they wanted the registered Republicans to vote on. It didn't look like a sample ballot. It was just a list of names, folded in 3 ways, sealed, had the address of every registered Republican in Flagler County, and had a business stamp on it, and it was paid for by a Republican PAC.
Right. So
And that is how they got the recommended people to vote. Where what were we doing? Handing them out at a tent to the people that would walk by.
Oh, they showed up.
And we got in trouble doing that.
Yeah.
We-
What were you gonna say?
The New York Times had an article on the guys who raised the money for Josh. Does anybody else see it besides me?
heard about
Well,
that.
see, I think they were from Stetson. I mean, they were just a couple of sharp guys who realized they could do this.
Yeah.
And so they put it together and they raised, as we know, they raised like $10 million.
Yeah.
So I'll get the article and bring it in.
Please, or forward it to me. by
If we do this, if we come up with a flyer about what it's about, how to donate money, things like that, the table that I'm getting at the Flagler Pride Festival that we're going to tell about Indivisible and about voting, I'll have the flyer there and people can take them and maybe they'll donate to you.
I don't think it's all going to happen that quickly,
By
but
June.
we'll try. Yeah, we'll try. So if you go and look at,
If the Republicans have PACs and we don't have any,
yeah,
we need to start one.
yeah, agreed.
That's
So-
what these
yeah.
guys, that's what these guys knew, that
Yeah.
there's an available amount of money out there, and these guys tapped into it.
So
And
if you-
these are nobodies.
Yeah, so
you know?
Fine already held office, but where Greco is the guy who ran against Morley and didn't even
Yes.
campaign. But it's all online and it's all public information. If you go look at his donations, the day he announced and the day he put in his paperwork, he had $20,000 placed in his campaign account, and his campaign treasurer, whose address is on Monroe Street in Tallahassee, by the way, because he's a Republican and they're organized, was all taken care of, and he entered the race with 20 grand, which is more than I think Morley ever raised in all his efforts. So that we can perhaps encourage again somebody to run because we have money. Is the first assumption is that Trump's administration is circling the drain. I don't know if it's like that, but his agenda is falling apart. Does that have any effect on local elections, on our state election? Or is Washington here?
Too soon to tell.
Yeah, too soon to tell. But can that be leveraged? And keep hearing in my ear J.B. Pritzker, governor of Illinois, saying we cannot allow a moment's peace in the camp of the other side of the Republicans. So
I agree with that.
Yeah.
We've had conversations here at this table in the past, you, Al, and Dave, who would talk about his name, the southern gentleman from Louisiana,
Oh.
Carville.
James Carville.
Carville, yeah.
James Carville.
I've always liked him a lot,
Yeah.
but he let me down last fall.
Yeah.
But you
By
and
the way,
Dave would
because he
talk
said,
about.
be specific, what did Carville say?
Well, he was saying that there was no way Kamala would lose, and that she was going to win, and that Trump was going to lose, and he had me believing it, hook, line, and sinker.
Excuse me, I thought you were referring to the fact that James Carville said, let's do nothing
Well,
for
so then
6
yes,
months.
so
That's
then
what he
Dave
said,
and Al have been talking at our group
But-
about how
I
Carville
buy into
said,
that
lay
one.
down and do
I-
nothing.
I-
I don't buy into that.
I think Schumer
Okay.
made a mistake. I followed it very closely, and the argument was, and it might be true, that it would have given Trump even more power to do what he wanted to do. And I say afterwards, I said, oh, maybe Chuck was right, maybe Schumer was right. And after I thought about it, I said, no, that would have been great. Let him screw things up as much as possible.
And he is.
Yeah.
No, he isn't because.
He doesn't
We're
put the
fighting.
point in
Because
that
we
area.
gave him a pass on the CR. We didn't have to have a budget.
Continuing resolution.
Okay, the continuing resolution to keep the government funded, 10 Democrats voted for that. Otherwise, the government would have shut down.
Right.
And that, I think, would have been preferable.
I don't.
I don't either.
Okay.
So,
That
we're
was what
divided.
makes the world go round.
So to answer your question, if we go on CNN or MSNBC, we see what Trump is doing. If you go on Fox, prices have come down, gas has come down. It's a different world.
Yeah,
right?
it's
Seriously,
the truth.
some
We're in a
comments-
post-truth world. Yeah.
Right.
Some comments that I've seen online, people actually believe everything is rosy.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
He's doing a great job. So I'd be careful about circling the drain. I don't think it's quite there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree.
Okay. Yeah. But look at his poll numbers.
Yeah.
Look
They're
at
all
his
But
poll numbers.
then you see those poll numbers, but are the same poll numbers shown on Fox?
They are.
Yeah.
Really?
And he's
Interesting.
pissed off.
In fact,
Yeah, he's
Oh, yeah.
in
he
fact, the
lost
first
his mind.
round of negative poll numbers came from Fox.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yes,
And he threw Fox,
The New
fake
York
news
Times,
Fox.
the New York
under it.
Times, the New York Times journalist that I read said, "It kills me to say this, but Fox's polling is legitimate. They do fairly accurate, fairly legitimate polling, and it's showing that." And what you were saying about Carville, also go back to Carville. When you have somebody like, as far as no rest and stuff like that, not letting them relax, you have David Brooks, world-renowned
opinion writer, New York
Right.
Times. Okay.
Journalist for the New York Times, conservative. Now, MAGA? No, never. But conservative? Nobody would challenge his conservative credentials. His last line well, I don't think it was his last writing, but within the last week or two was, "We have nothing to lose but our chains." He's quoting Karl Marx.
Yeah.
I mean, and that's why I'm being so extreme in saying let them shut the government down. Let the American people understand the implication of letting someone like this go crazy.
Well, then worse things would have happened if that would have shut down. So they had to pick the lesser of the two evils, and so they did. And it's my belief, I want to fight.
Until you have the Civil War, until it gets to the point where you have the Civil War, where you have to have something really bad happen. We have to have something real bad happen.
You're right.
In order to settle anything.
But
here.
that might not
and
have been
in order
it.
to put a little salve on it, so we can keep it going a little bit more without hurting this group or without hurting that group. And I understand. Look,
They would have done more damage.
I apologize for my position because I'm not wealthy by any means, but my pension is New York State. It's not going to be affected by any of this. Mm-hmm. And so I understand that a lot of people would really be injured if the government shut down. And that's not good. But I think a lot of people are going to be injured one way or another, and I want to get there. It's almost like war when you say, "Oh, I don't believe in war." Who the hell believes in war?
Right.
But when you have an Adolf Hitler, you got to do something. I don't believe in war.
Well,
Okay, great. Oh, well, you don't want those people to get hurt because he would have done something bad. No, I think we need that confrontation.
I don't disagree with you. I mean, what we're doing now is death by 1,000 cuts anyway.
You can put the order in.
I don't have an order.
Oh.
Right, it's death by 1,000 cuts.
That's what I'm saying.
That's what
We're
we're doing
ending
right
soon.
now.
Yeah, but the question I have to ask is: are you afraid of the government shutdown and the people who will be harmed, or are you afraid that Trump and the communications machine are going to blame the Democrats?
That too.
Even
part of it.
Well, I know he would try and do that, but I don't know how. Yeah,
but
and he would be successful with the MAGA people, of course.
Yes.
look, the last time he was in office, Donald Trump allowed a shutdown of 54 days, longest our government was ever shut down. He did not want to start it back up, but he didn't have the horsepower to convince the House and Senate not to vote to get another 3 months, 6 months, whatever the short-term CR. He did not want it shut down. Why do you think Donald Trump would want our government shut down? What is he demonstrating to you daily through EOs, executive orders, and other things that are way outside of what we know the Constitution is? What would benefit him to have it shut down? And if you ponder that, if you think about that, you will see that would be the greatest gift
Martial law.
we could give him, because tanks would be in the street. He would shut down federal money, and I was just reading this. My father-in-law is a state pensioner in California, and he received a letter from Newsom organization, retired sheriff, stating that if the state has to stop receiving federal money, which is something Trump is threatening blue states, they will suspend and freeze 50% of state pensions to balance out the needs of the state. So it could touch you if the state of New York loses federal money.
I think ours is set up differently.
The point I'm saying is, no one at this table could have a week ago, a day ago, imagined or thought what we thought would never happen, could never happen, is happening. So the point, as far as the failure or the turning off of our government, that is what they want. Read 2025.
Yeah.
Read
That's what they
what
want.
Right.
Miller, oh my God, you see him on the news the other day? And all these, they were wanting, he was begging behind the scenes for the House of Representatives not to keep it going. And it was just by luck that people got involved and said, wait a minute, we got to keep it going because it's the one guardrail we have.
Kurt, we were,
Just
What
a
do you-
thought, just a
If you
thought.
know anything about history,
yeah.
if you know anything about history, why is Hegseth in there? So he can control the Pentagon and the armed forces. He's already getting a Sudetenland with Mexico. And do we know what the Sudetenland was?
Yeah.
Anybody?
Neville, talk about Neville Chamberlain.
It's
Munich.
that military
That area
base
around
that runs
Czechoslovakia.
like 1,200 miles.
But
Do you think when he puts
The issue-
troops in the southern border, what do you think is going to happen? He's going to go into Mexico, and he's trying to. That's the reason why Canada is a part of the deflection. They have this all thought out.
And why hasn't that guy been fired?
What?
I mean,
Hegseth?
really?
Hegseth.
Trump loves him.
I mean,
Trump
Trump
loves
loves
him.
him.
I mean, seriously,
He's
ridiculous, all the things that he's done that have been immoral and illegal.
Something that never respond to your first.
Right.
Try to practice it. Your first reaction response to what you hear, because that's what they want you to do. That's what they. The other day, he signed an executive order directing Homeland Security and the Secretary of Defense to get together and develop a plan of how to merger our active duty service members to assist ICE and immigrants, putting armed soldiers in our streets. Now, the real reason why he's doing that is because Congress hasn't funded our immigration homeland security yet. That's why he's relying on our sheriffs here locally, police locally, to go out and do a lot of these sweeps, because Congress hasn't passed the bill to fund this huge expense that Homeland Security needs to support ICE. It's still not there. The defense has been funded, and he wants to take active duty service members and put them in our nation's streets to assist in what he calls the roundup of aliens that are terrorists attacking us. And he believes that will circumvent the Constitution. Now, they hadn't done it yet, but it's coming. And the day we see M1 Abram tanks running down Atlanta or Tallahassee or
Palm Coast Parkway.
Palm Coast Parkway,
on Palm
the
Coast
people are
Parkway.
going to lose
They'll
their...
never get through Palm Coast.
Yeah.
The traffic's too
By the
bad.
way, they'll damage the roads, and we'll never get them fixed.
But if they do that, then you can have it Tiananmen Square. Then you
Yeah.
can have a guerrilla
That's where I was
And-
going.
and
Mark.
so-
A lot of
Oh,
a lot
yeah,
of your
I
comments.
know, I know.
I take your comments.
Right.
Some of them, I hate to admit it, but I have to think about some of the things that you said.
what I-
They're 100%. They're 100%. I think you're on the mark. But on the other hand, what will be the reaction of the American people of having tanks in the streets?
Right,
Do
exactly.
you think they're going to sit around and say, "Oh yeah, so we
Some
got
will.
tanks in our streets"?
Some will stand there and wave the flag.
Exactly.
Schumer will
But
wear a
ultimately-
letter.
that's right. Yeah. Right.
Kurt,
This is for you to understand and for all of us
I
to
think we have to
understand.
get there.
I was
I
taught
think-
boxing in the Marines. I was an undefeated boxer in the Marines. And when you're taught boxing, how do you think they teach you? First, anybody?
Protect yourself.
Punch her.
Right, exactly. Defense. You first have to learn defense before you can strike out. And that's what Mark is saying. So because Trump is trolling us, all this is just trolling. And he's just throwing us out and waiting for us to go crazy. And so you gotta think first, you know? And you gotta put up your dukes to defend yourself first, all right?
Right.
Remember that, in boxing, you gotta learn defense before you can even strike out.
I'm on Team Pritzker. I'm not on Team Carville.
Yeah, I think James Carville, who
I read
I
it.
also respect,
Right.
I think is dead wrong.
I read a great,
Yeah.
I read a great piece. I think it was on a YouTube video, and they were looking at 17 to 18, 16 and a half. That's when he was first elected. Had House and Senate control. Donald Trump ran, and he got it. He didn't really know what he was doing. He was surrounded by people that were, you know, you can't do this, you can't do that.
Sensible.
Sensible people. He got one bill passed, and that was that tax break. He got nothing else done. And then in 2018 midterms, there was the largest turnaround of Republican Democrats in the House of Representatives and the Senate.
Well, I will endeavor to, get a list of open offices that are up for those. It's easy to do, actually. And then I will also share information about PACs. And in fact, even the rules about petition gathering as well. By the way, in response to your comment, Mark, that when you need 1,000 petitions, you have to get 1,200. Because a large number are going to be found invalid for one reason or another. I had an opportunity to talk to somebody in Katie's office, and they take a course and they renew their acquaintance with the rules of identifying your signature. And within, so I'd be curious to know how much yours changed. And of course, that signatures change, but they have
Truth
some.
be told, I'm not consistent.
I wasn't. Yeah.
I wasn't
Okay.
surprised when it was challenged. I don't think it was anything nefarious, but it did happen.
It did happen. So
Well,
we know that.
it
We know it works.
was, I forget what it was for, but
Right.
it was one of the petitions, and I got a letter saying.
I did
that
too.
it
Same
was-
thing, same
it was-
thing, yes.
So with that, we'll end for this week, but I'll attempt to do my homework. I'll send it around to you. I have your email address. I found your email address. I will, and so on. And we'll gather again next Wednesday. We are set for here. We're on the calendar, and we'll continue
Just one
this
more
discussion.
thing. Just that Mike has to know that he's only allowed to be this quiet in his first session.
Well, you know what?
I think somebody needs to, somebody needs to explain that.
Yes,
that, you know.
okay. We hear your heads nodding.
Thank you for
That's
coming.
That's not enough. Yes, thank you for being
New
here.
faces.
And again, same time, same station, next Wednesday. Thank you for being here. Yeah?
But anyway,
So what
finish.
do you think?
So-
Is anyone holding your house?
Yeah, I'll also.
View.
I will say, I keep a list of what I call separation chat, and I'm still using the name separation chat, regulars.